работы конференции «Образование детей с особыми потребностями в
Let us
современном
begin
мире.
the
Ценности
first
цифровых
international,
технологий».
the third day of the first international
Сегодня в
conference of
рамках программы
education for children
конференции
with special needs in the
проводится
world.
пленарное
Today,
заседание,
during the conference, we
предусматривающее
will have
выступление
a plenary
итогов
session
пленарного заседания с
with
докладом,
the
а также модераторов сессии,
presentations of the
работающих
participants of the conference
15 и 16 декабря.
and
Кроме того, сегодня в
presentations
рамках третьего дня работы
of
конференции
the section
будут
of
подведены
the
итоги
sections
второго всероссийского конкурса молодых
and
исследователей в области коррекционной педагогики
the
и
awards
дисциплинарной
ceremony
психологии.
of the
Следуя ранее разработанной программе разрешите перейти к выступлению с докладом.
All-Russian competition for young researchers in the fields of correctional pedagogy and special psychology. Let us begin
Тема моего
plenary
выступления
session.
– современное состояние и направление развития российской
Topic of
дефектологии.
my presentation is
Если
current state and direction of
зададим себе
development of
вопрос,
special defectology.
почему
We ask
мы
ourselves a
используем
question:
слово
why
дефектология до сих пор в России?
why defectology in
Почему до
Russia?
сих пор в
Up to this
России мы
date,
называем
why do we
специалистов,
still
главных
have
специалистов
specialists,
в
main
жизни детей с
specialists in
ограниченными возможностями
children
здоровья
with
как дефектологи?
special
Почему
needs
это
like
слово мы
defectologists?
стремимся
Why
заменить на нечто более
do we
созвучное или
still
политкорректное?
use this word and
Попробую
did not
сегодня
replace it
на первых слайдах и в первых своих
to
словах
something more
ответить на
politically
этот
correct?
справедливо возникающий вопрос.
Let me answer
Так
this
сложилось, что в российской науке
natural question.
появляется данное направление.
Russian science
Если мы посмотрим
has
на
this
историческое развитие
direction of
академической
development,
науки дефектологии в
of
России, мы
academic
увидим,
development
что
of
1908
correctional
год
pedagogy in
является
Russia.
первое
In-
учреждение, которое в дальнейшем
You can
становится
see
не
that in
просто образовательным
1908,
учреждением,
the first
но организацией, занимающейся
educational
подготовкой
institution
профессиональной
which
организацией обучения
treated
и
the
подготовки
questions of
специалистов.
special education and the training of
Организатором
special
такого
needs
процесса
experts appears.
становится
And the
Всеволод Петрович
founder
Горченко,
of
который
this
создает
process,
здесь, где сейчас
of this
находится
institution,
Институт
was
коррекционной
Всеволод
педагогики,
Krashenko.
по адресу Москва,
At
Погодинская
this
улица,
place, you can find
3.
the
Отделение
Institution
по
of Correctional
педагогике для
Pedagogy
детей доктора
and
Кащенко.
the special school for
В
children with special needs
1927 году
founded by Kashenko. In
данная организация, которая уже умеет
1927,
особый
this
опыт,
organization with
которая
a
является
special
признанной в
experience,
России,
which
которая имеет
is
собственную
recognized in
методику,
Russia and
меняется.
has its
На
principles,
базе данного
changes.
появляется и
And
экспериментальный дефектологический институт. Именно дефектологический, который
the
возглавляет
Defectology
Василий Иванович
Institute
Выгодский.
replaces
Именно
this
с первых
institution.
работ Василия Ивановича
This
Выгодского сегодня
institution was led by Vygotsky.
складывается понятийный аппарат дефектологии как
At
науки.
that time,
Появляется общая
we
научная школа Льва
formed
Ивановича
defectology
Выгодского,
as a science
которая
and
занимается
formed
вопросами
the school of
культурно-исторической
Vygotsky,
психологии в части изучения
which
возможностей
treats questions
сопровождения
of
развития
psychology and
здорового ребенка.
support of children with
Дальнейшая
special needs.
история института связана
Further
с именами
history of the
известнейших
institute is
российских
connected
ученых.
to the names
Она
of
известна не
the most
только в России,
outstanding
но и за
Russian
рубежом.
scientists, famous not only in Russia but
Изменили
also
всю историю
abroad. They
дефектологии в
changed
России.
the history of defectology in Russia.
Научно-исследовательский институт дефектологии
The
известен
Scientific Institute of Defectology
работы, посвященные
and
вопросам
works
сопровождения
dedicated to
всех категорий детей.
topics
Причем
of
в них
support of all
касается
categories of
узких
children with
вопросов.
special needs,
Разворачиваются
even the most
современные
specific
научные
ones,
направления,
and
аналогов которых нет в мире.
by
Например, в обучении
unique
глухих детей появляется
wishes,
направление
for example, of deaf
коммуникационная
children,
система обучения глухих детей,
also by
позволившая
support
уже
of
в
communication and
60-е, в 70-е годы выпускать из школ глухих
development
детей,
of
которые
communication of
свободно
deaf
общаются
children,
устной речью.
and it
Учебники
graduates deaf
какого-то
children who
качества,
can use
даже доступной
sign language.
усиливающей аппаратуры в то время не было.
even without
Понимаем, что впервые на базе данного
hearing
института,
aids. At the base of this institute, thanks to the
таких
development
ученых,
of
как Соколянский и многих других,
great sciences like
появляется направление
Polanski and
обучения слепых и
others,
глухих детей.
we started
Кроме того,
educating
именно здесь возникают
blind and deaf
новые
children.
направления, связанные с дошкольным
Also,
образованием, с возможностью в дальнейшем создать систему ранней помощи.
a
Таким
system of
образом,
preschool
дефектология
education
как
appeared at the base of this
как
institution.
академическое
So,
направление
defectology as an academic direction
возникает в
in
Москве
scientific research
по адресу
was founded in
Погодинская, дом 8,
Moscow
на базе
at
одной
Pagodinskaya 8
организации.
at the base of one scientific organization, the quality of work of which
образовательной системы в
provided
России в целом.
support for
Здесь создаются учебники
Russian
учебные
educational
материалы.
system
Именно
in
здесь
general.
пишутся программы. Здесь
It created
создаются
manuals,
подходы
educational
обучения.
programs,
Параллельно
methods, and
активно развивается вузовская наука. Но самые
effective
прорывные
university
исследования,
programs as
вызывающие
well.
кардинальные
And the most groundbreaking researchers which
в институте. Таким образом, институт
created new
как
directions in
организация
science were also
на развитие
developed there.
науки и дефектологии в России в целом.
So this is the
Понимая
institution
это, мы посчитали важным
which founded defectology in Russia.
запустить направление,
That's why we decided that it was very important to
направленных на изучение
support the
растительной
research
дефектологии в истории. На базе института создан и успешно действует
of
Центр
supportive
современной
research
координации научных исследований в специальном образовании
of defectology and
Института
its
Петровича
history
Кащенко.
on the
В
base
рамках
of the
данного
institution
центра
of
проводится
founded by
создание
Kashyenko.
новых продуктов и
We
видеопродуктов,
created new products,
прямых реплик
video,
изданий,
and
которые запустили и
editions
изобрели,
of
на самом деле, и
works which
запустили
changed
новое направление в науке,
the
которое
perspective and
сегодня технологии не так широко представлены для того,
but
чтобы
are not
сказать
so
на
widely
военном
represented now
системе использования, как должны были бы
and
быть.
are not as quoted
Кроме
as they
этого,
could be.
здесь создаются
Apart from
новые базы
this,
данных.
we create
Начиная с
new
этого года
databases.
выпускаем хрестоматии,
From
которые
this year,
обозначают
we have
инструменты,
started issuing
делают видимыми для молодых исследователей
encyclopedias for
открывание развития
young
системы
researchers,
и
which helps to
помогают
create
молодым
new
ученым
support
познакомиться
systems
с тем,
and
что
get
многие
acquainted
из них считают собственным достоянием в науке.
what most of them think
Хрестоматии будут
are
посвящены трудам российских дефектологов в области обучения
their
детей
own
с
development.
глубоким нарушением
These
зрения, с глубоким нарушением слуха.
works
Отобрать
are
в электронном
dedicated
достаточно
to
объемном
children
формате
with
самые значимые работы оказалась сложной
hearing and
задачей.
visual
Для поиска
impairments.
экспертной
This was a
группы,
hard
так
task.
как таких работ
We
не
created a special
создан был
council
продукт
to
хрестоматии, который
choose the
обобщает
works because there are a lot of them.
направленным на обучение, воспитание,
We
социализацию детей
decided
с
to
выраженными интеллектуальными нарушениями
support
и выраженными
socialization
нарушениями в развитии.
of children
Мы считаем
with the
нашей
different
целью,
impairments,
задачей
and our main goal
на
is to
основании исследования,
give
которые позволят
rebirth
людям,
to
продолжающим идти
research
на новых основаниях, во-первых,
and
самоопределиться
and allow
с
children,
педагогической школы, во-вторых, быть
the
максимально
researchers,
корректным в том,
to
что
be
сделано, и то, что уже является достоянием в истории. И в-третьих,
correct
позволит продолжать, а
in
не создавать, не
their
изобретать велосипеда, не создавать то, что давно
researches
доказано.
and
К сожалению, из-за того,
communication
что
and create
состояние
new
науки
things, but not
гипотетизировано в хорошем
repeat
смысле этого
the
слова,
researches
мы
which were
сталкиваемся с
already
ситуацией,
made.
когда вновь создаваемые общественные
We are now
организации или структуры
facing a situation when organizations and structures
образовательных
created
предлагают
by
разные решения,
institutions
не зная, к сожалению,
suggest different decisions to problems
проблемы и задачи о том, что
without
уже было
actually
сделано.
knowing
Мы считаем
of
важным
the
представить
research
это
which was carried out
систему
before.
использования и
So that's
понимания
why we decided to create this database to
На слайде есть
provide better
серия,
understanding
мы
of
продолжаем.
scientific
Это
works of
работы
Russian scientists.
Кащенко, Выгодского,
These are the works of
которые были написаны
Luria,
в
Kashyenko,
институте
Vygotsky,
и существенно
which were
повлияли на
published
развитие
by the
представления
institute
о детях,
and
дефективных или, как
developed the vision and the understanding of children with special needs. The institute understands that it works in different scientific fields and defectology as well. The deficit of human resources does influence the quality of training, which isn't satisfactory everywhere. We need to organize
колледжей и вузов с учетом их специальных компетенций, но по направлению специально-дефектологической
organize works in different institutions and universities and master's degree in defectology.
К сожалению, она остается пока
Russian universities.
но мы понимаем, что
Unfortunately, it's not governmentally funded right now. And
преподаватели, которые сегодня реализуют
professors
дисциплины по направлению подготовки,
work in this field now
специально-дефектологическое образование,
in defectology
базового
do not
дефектологического
have
не имеют
special training and high qualifications to train students and do not have special characteristics. But all universities which provide trainings on the specialization of pedagogical sciences have special schools of logopedists and defectologists. We think that unqualified professors cannot provide qualification and this way qualified specialists are not graduated from Russian universities. The average age of a professor in Russian universities of defectology schools in further pedagogy or tiflopedagogy more than 60 years. And the number of them is very small, actually, about 20 people all over the country. So we want to prevent the catastrophe of disappearing of defectology in Russia. I hope we can transmit this system. And that's why we decided to found this contest. Today, we have less participants than the last year. It is connected to lack of financing. It wasn't as widely promoted as the last year. And but the interest to the contest is still there, and today we will see the results of them. So what we can say today about them? We have fixed general problems. We don't know basic definitions and poor knowledge of people who educate children with special needs and poor vision of direction of the scientific defectology in Russia. We understand that people who are working on their thesis do not have qualifications and do not know the problematic of the field, and this needs the attention of scientific community. We want to increase the number of specialists to the number of physicists they write and the number of schools that graduate specialists. And I also wanted to attract your attention to the values which isn't known by anyone by now, but proven by the works of great scientists. And this is the burning question. Still, what do we need to know about scientific research? We need to get acquainted with the methodology, and it is necessary to create a manual for special categories of children, organize pedagogy groups, and create special schools. This is a long-term process and profound process, and nobody could tell that our manuals of special education would have such serious mistakes. This process cannot parallel to scientific research. If we do not pay attention to scientific research and do not consider them important, the source of knowledge, which is very poor now, will disappear. And that's why I want to attract the attention of scientific community to the research, scientific research as a priority of Russian educational system. So what are the research of our institution? This is the research of modern children. Why do we do them? We know very little about children who are taught in different environments.
Встречаются. И какая вот такая полифакторная модель, в которой это все разворачивается, на самом деле происходит. Выводы, которые мы сегодня получаем и которые мы слышим, они связаны
Conclusions we have now are connected to
different monitoring
Monitoring
system,
of
but they don't always have the causes and the mechanism of what you have to work with. Just a constatation of a fact does not allow us to affect the situation. We have to understand what triggers it. How can you influence that? I'd like to give you an educational system example. It's very important to do it, but if we don't know how does the valuability of children develop, of children and young adults who are in different situations and environments, if we don't understand how these environments affects them, and if we don't understand how does information change a child, their valuability of different things in life, then how can we understand what should we pay attention to? Or do we think that every single child has to be dealt with in the exact same manner? Their time is quite constrained and everything should be thought of. Every event should have a meaning. If we don't understand that and we just waste this time and won't be able to catch up, then because we don't speak about children with disabilities, but we speak about children with faster tempos of development. We have a few diagnostic complexes, and we have conducted research with approbation of these ideas, and now we're going to work with them on the example of multiple schools.
the complex is for different categories of children in the support of children with autism. We created an electronic resource which helps us to estimate the state of development of children with autism. We did not have such technologies before, and during the latest 10 years, the practice and approaches were not so developed. That's why the institution decided to take care of this direction of the technology. The procedure, the instrument, and document descriptions of approaches must be more precise because specialists do not have enough competence to work with all children with special needs. And I do not agree with such opinion, defectologist does not have competence to work with children with special need, but to organize the educational programs for such children and create special environments for education. It means that these specialists can work in different environments and carry out test events for children with severe speech impediments. This is the category which is increasing now. These are children with difficulties with written speech. And the Institute takes care of organizing special treatment of children with dyslexia together with the Pushkin Institute. This is the problem connected to biological reasons as well as psychological and pedagogical problems. And we cannot solve this problem only by pedagogy means. There are also materials for children with locomotor disorders, which was forgotten for many years and not developed during a long period of time. The laboratory was closed for many years, and 2 years ago we opened the laboratory again and created new developments in estimation of everyday skills of children with special needs and compensatory skills, which provide mobility and independence for children with special needs. Visual impairments, which also need special attention. Took care of behavior of such children and created correctional programs for them. Hearing impairments. This is the category where children are offered cochlear implants and medical operations to fix the problems. This is explained not only by medical component, but also by social factors, where we need actions of further pedagogists and social workers. The results must be programmed mathematically correct and worked out very properly, step by step. Our way to better results must be carried out according to a program. So, the results of better qualification can be seen not only in Russia, but all over the world. You cannot make time go at the same pace for all children in the class.
Вести урок в инклюзивном классе. То, что касается детей с интеллектуальными нарушениями, мы впервые предложили конкретные задания по всем основным...
We have specific objectives for all the subjects from classes from 1 to 4. It doesn't matter whether a child is in a correctional school or any other school. We can control the tendencies of this children development. We didn't have this toolbox before, and so we have this now. Besides that, we can also discuss the ideas of working with children of early age, those who have a risk of developmental disabilities. We have an additional laboratory that works on that. We have specialists on all the possible domains and all the possible disabilities that touch upon this. And of course, the question of psychological development of blind children, who will we have 2 dissertations that are due doctor's theses that are coming up on this subject right now. And they discuss the possibilities of inclusion of these children in interactions with adults and with their peers from the first year of their life. The results of the approbation of this diagnostic toolbox will be presented on the 20th of December of this year. It's very soon. You can take part in this conference. It's quite interesting. You can actually see the results. Another fundamental topic is actually the research of the health impact of different computer technologies and anything else. Our institute, together with different partners, with medical personnel, specialists in different domains of psychological and pedagogical sciences, we work with them. We see that in this period of forced distanced learning, we have a serious impact on health, especially touches upon children and teens alike.
29,5% специалистов признали, что в онлайн-уроках принимали участие все дети. В основном не все, в основном не принимали. В основном было организовано какое обучение? Электронное.
We organized distant learning for children in online format. In half of the cases, not everyone participated in them. These parents helped them. Mostly this were carried out by teachers, and now we can see the reaction of parents. And I want to say that everything created by Russian defectology is based on the structural space, on the certain position of furniture in a class, certain number of children in a class, the reglementation of behavior with children with hearing or visual impairments. Every word addressed to children must be addressed to each children personally. We thought of them properly, the material on if we do not have this special environment online, and that's the problem we faced during distant learning, and that's why we had to reform functions and restructure the program of adults teaching children with special needs and create methodological support for them and teach parents to form special skills to communicate with their children. It was not always successful. And I want to underline that everything we create is based on the spatial environment. Parents considered that in most cases the health condition of their children did not change, and they explain this by the quality of food and the regime of their children. Physical conditions are usually backache and headache. What is interesting that parents see children only use their smartphones for educational purposes. With distant learning, children started having more headaches and mood swings, and parents considered this to worsen the health condition of their children, especially in children with visual impairments and autistic spectrum disorders. They evoked muscle contractions and mood swings in such children. 2/3 of parents do not see any changes in their children's behavior during distant learning, but parents of children with deviant behavior saw the situation, the behavior of their children aggravate. What do educators think? 56% think that the condition of children did not change. They only saw visual changes in children. For example, they became more pale or more red, had red eyes. This is understandable, but nobody of parents or specialists could not answer the question what their children were busy with. And the research has showed that screen time is not an indicator of the quality of education of children, because it is important to monitor what children are actually doing at the computer. The research showed that children with special needs do know what darknet is, play in a casino, make dark shopping. And such behavior in the internet is not usual for children without disabilities, because they recognize them as dangerous. 18% of hearing of impaired children and 16% of visual impaired children were involved in such activities and aggressively interacted in the internet. 18% of them and of hearing impaired children and 31% of visual impaired children were aggressive in the net. And when parents learned about it, their reaction was evident. They prohibited children use the internet. The value system changed. Not knowing about the activities of children in the internet is a big problem of the educational system. And an important number, a significant number of children spend a lot of time surf internet, but instead of studying, and watch streams, text messages unsystematically. The information of different level of danger is consumed by children. What do we know about this stream of information? We know very little. I want also to present results of the research, not of scientific works or theses. And I want to say that support of children and families with of children with special needs, of hearing, visually impaired children, children with speech impediments are thoroughly studied, databases are created. And why did I decide to talk about this? During the lockdown, I wanted to understand what happened to a family. The majority told me about negative effects of lockdown on their life. Because before, their children assisted special groups, and there are families with elderly people, with small children who had a special regime of the day, and now they had to change it and spend all the day with them. And it is very important to support such families and present researches on this topic and pay attention. These are not random numbers. These are thousands of people studied. We try to base our products on this research, for example, podcasts. And it is understandable that podcasts of the Institute of Correctional Pedagogy is always based on research and is not just chaotic information. We create programs, 14 variants of educational programs for schools and working programs, as well as manuals. We created 6 new manuals for visually impaired children, 36 manuals and maquettes for children with mental disabilities. Apart from what I am showing you now, we are creating new products, IT products. For example, this interactive constructor for educational programs for children with special needs. It's the most popular constructor in Russian and helps support children with disabilities. We develop scenarios for educational programs, for different handbooks, manuals, seminars, online consultations, and other products. At the last slide, you can see my contacts. If you want to get acquainted with our products, and if you are interested in our products, you can call me or text me. That's how I want to finish my presentation. Sorry, I took a bit more time than usual. And now I want to give floor to Andrei Andrianov.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. I'm extremely grateful for organizing such an event. And to be honest, it was quite abrupt, your speech. I wanted to hear even more because actually quite useful. I'm going to agree with the viewers we have that you've delineated the proper tendencies and all of this. It was all correctly. I'm going to try to launch my presentation. And I wanted to have a few different topics which touch upon the questions of, give me a second here, which touch upon the government policies, but you had a part about this. You spoke about this block quite concisely. You had a few excerpts from that. For example, the president's decree on the decade of childhood. I would like to point your attention, everyone, to this, because in Russia, the topic of my discussion is actually the Russian experience of forming financial literacy in persons with disabilities and special educational needs. And we can't really speak about this topic without any legal documents and without decrees like this. This experience would have been quite negative. To be frank, our Russian Federation has a special commission at our president's side, which works with these problems and these questions. Of course, the Ministry of Enlightenment, as the head organization, coordinates the educational process in children with special educational needs. The events that take part at this plan, the Decade of Childhood, you can find the document, this one in the net. Actually, there is a system that Tatiana spoke about. We need systematic work There shouldn't be episodic of inclusion in working with this target audience, target category. And the system proved quite formidable, actually, as Tatiana again delineated. But if we're going to speak more at length about these things, the previous report spoke about the how, especially the approach to this problem. I'm going to focus my report on the topic of what is this about, especially the financial literacy. And I was very interested and even inspired by the part in your paper, the slide that you had about the research when it comes to the digital footprint. This is one of the pain points, actually, which is connected to financial literacy and financial security of our citizens. That comprises, of course, citizens with special health limitations. This target audience, this isn't just something up in the air. This actually exists. There is also delineated in certain legal documents that have been drafted up by our government, Russian government included. This is the strategy of raising financial literacy in Russian Federation for the years 2017-2023. And recently, we now have the objective on working with regional programs in raising financial literacy in regions of our country, depending on how this work is being conducted in the regions of our country. And to be fair, each one of these documents, this category is shown as a priority for all of these people that work with this. As Tatiana showed us the statistics and the data and the analysis of this digital security for citizens, it is quite important to understand that sooner or later, every child that is in this target category will have to work with a financial instrument. This child is going to buy something online, going to buy services online. And of course, that's why we have to help them get these skills and capabilities of working with these technologies and this toolbox that they have at their disposal. Of course, the key movement mechanisms in all of this are in raising and developing these theoretical cases for people with special health limitations and disabilities. Of course, the Bank of Russia that takes a great part in this. There is a certain additional task force that works in this domain, and within this task force, we have specialists from different organizations, and we have work which is being conducted. I think this is the correct approach because yesterday we had a methodical seminar where we considered the importance of recommendations that this task force actually drafted up. And these recommendations right now have a nature, which I mean, they are just recommendations, but sooner or later in the next year, in the coming year, as is being announced right now, these recommendations for financial organizations will actually be included. Some of these recommendations will become mandatory. And to know these recommendations, these regulations will be a good idea. Dear colleagues, to know these recommendations would be very beneficial, and we're going to have more talks. Once we draft up the legal document, we're going to conduct a webinar or a conference on paying attention to these recommendations. So please stay in touch. Thanks to the Institute of Correctional Pedagogy, is going to have news about such an event. Going forth, of course, a contribution to this common goal that is also exists from the Association of Raising Financial Literacy. And we have delineated that working with people with special needs, or disabilities is our priority number one. All of these questions are difficult even for people without disabilities, adults. For example, a recent survey showed that citizens themselves say that they have a good grasp on financial literacy and had only 42%. That means that 58% don't really know their way about finances. And this is connected to the idea that it is a difficult topic for many people. And when you try to speak about this topic to people with disabilities, it attracts even more attention in this case because you have to work more on this. You have to plan everything out in a more concise and proper manner. Of course, working with the Institute of Correctional Pedagogy as an example of successive work, we have a glossary of financial terms. I spoke more about this yesterday. I'm not going to stop to speak about it anymore. And so the next of my points, I'd like to support Tatiana here. I want to speak about the advanced training for young specialists for this target category of people. And besides the educational process that will have all the parts of the ethics that are required in this domain, of course, it would be a very good idea to teach these future teachers and future educators the skills to work and to form financial literacy. There's one specific idea that I'd like to point out, that the terminology of finance is quite difficult in its bigger part. And to define these difficult things in simple words is a special skill in itself. And so maybe this would be a very good idea to have this in pedagogical universities, for example, an additional curriculum for this for future teachers and future educators, so that people would be able to actually teach people financial literacy. We have a pilot experiment. We had a program like this. It is right now in open access on the website of our association, and every person willing can take part in this, can obtain the required skills that we have delineated there. You can download the presentations that are there, or you can even use these materials for whatever your class, for example, is. We have methodical seminars. As I said, I had one yesterday. It's not the first year we've been doing this. We had methodical seminars last year as well, where we've showed and we show the best methodical practices when it comes to working people with disabilities. I would also like, I believe that right now we're being seen and viewed by the whole country, that's what I see in the chat, and I believe that many regions see the realization, the implementation of these ideas and these elements thanks to teachers themselves. I would like to recommend to all of these people, if you believe that this experience is something you have and is quite interesting and efficient, then please try to share it with other participants of this process, with other teachers. We have events like this. We can become a platform for you where you or your colleagues may present their practices. Besides the idea that different colleagues present their materials, we also have a special competition of methodical materials. Last year, it grew in the number of nominations, and last year we didn't have a distinct nomination for working with people with disabilities, but we had a nomination for working with people in care homes. And in part, this nomination saw many good works of different people who work with people with disabilities. So the committee had to give the winner a diploma in winning in this program. And of course, the program of all of this is in open access. We openly share these materials, and we're going to be very glad if your programs will be seen in the next competition. It will be launched at the beginning of the next year. And up until May or maybe even April, we're going to have the results. And then we're going to give out the prizes. And I believe it is very important for teachers to really go to great lengths to make their practices known and widespread. What, as I think at least, this is what's actually going on, what has already been done. What are the key plans for the future that we have? It'll be very beneficial, actually, to share our ideas with you. And I believe that working with financial literacy in this target category, and so I'd like to talk about our plans for the future. Of course, we have different projects and programs when it comes to our association. We have a special direction for working with other different projects. And I think it's quite a positive tendency. We started getting applications of projects that aim at raising financial literacy in children and people with disabilities. The expert committee that evaluates all of these things, all these projects, and decides which projects to support financially. This expert committee has a specific category for these types of projects because, as I said, it is a priority direction for us right now when it comes to the strategy of the Russian Federation and regional projects. So we're going to keep working with this. We have 3 projects as of right now. We have supported 3 projects, which will start existence come January next year. It will be, of course, throughout the whole country. And of course, the support of methodical recommendations, which I have delineated already. There will be a competition held January to April, as I said already. And within this competition, we are going to have not only your applications, but we're also going to have a list of methodical speeches for nominees of this competition, for them to speak about the minimal requirements for their works and for their projects. We have a lot of applications, but the quality sometimes leaves us to be desired. So there is this proposition to have a different nomination for forming methods and programs of raising financial literacy in children and people with special needs. And so we're going to create a separate expert block that will have special work with these nominants, with these applicants, in order to really explain them the recommendations and the requirements they have. What is going on when it comes to creating infrastructural projects? Of course, this is very important. It's not only about people with disabilities, but also about people without disabilities when it comes to the digital footprint or digital trace they have. All of this stimulates the idea of creating and drafting up such infrastructural projects, which will be, first of all, completely safe and secure. And secondly, there will be, when it comes to the quality of content, will not have any frauds. It's very important to create this trusting atmosphere where people will be able to just leave your child to traverse this digital space. One of the examples of such a project is the immersive exposition, the territory of financial literacy. The focus, of course, is financial literacy, but the topics that will be inside it, inside of this digital world, are going to be touching upon many different topics. This project, this immersive exposition, will have a virtual reality environment where amongst the trees and buildings that are created by virtual means, you'll be able to obtain information when it comes to how should you behave in a digital environment, how can you resist fraud in this very safe environment. Therefore, the creation and support of such infrastructural projects, it is one of the key elements of the association's activities because it attracts attention and the raising of financial literacy in people with health limitations. Colleagues, I'm not going to take any more time, so you can see my contact data here. I'll be glad if you send us your experience when it comes to these topics, your ideas, your propositions. I'm going to note this once again. I'm very grateful to the organizers for the ability to give my speech today. And I'd like to point out that this topic of working with children with special needs, there is a whole database on this, but even given that, this question is not being worked on enough when it lacks project activities. So I invite all of you to work together because it's only with joint efforts we'll be able to create a high quality and accessible type of content for people with different knowledges. Thank you very much, Tatiana. Thank you, Andrei. We're going to go on with our plenary session. I'd like to pass the word to head of the Federal Project of Hospital Schools in Russia, We Learn to Know, Professor Sergei Sharikov. Sergei, to you the word. Tatiana, good day. I hope you hear me well.
Thank you for your invitation. Unfortunately, I don't have my slides on me, but I'll try to indicate all the points which you excellently presented today. Discuss them again and present my research work on a big group of children undergoing long-term treatment in hospitals and at home. Retrospectively, looking at the program of the conference, I want to say that this topic is very fresh, extremely new, and very relevant. It makes all the specialists think about correctional psychology and pedagogy and think about the burning questions and research we will have to carry out in the future. Talking about children undergoing long-term treatment, why do we discuss it at different international conferences? This is a very wide-scale problem and a significant problem for today. There are no databases on children undergoing long-term treatment now, but we can say that the Union of Pediatricians in Russia treat somatic diseases of children and of children who go to school and undergo treatment at home. How do we work with such children in our pedagogical environment? We don't know anything about this. According to the Ministry of Health, about 600,000 children undergo long-term treatment and 500,000 in residential care. I need to point out that we will have to clear out several definitions in special education. Special education provides quality education for children with special needs, but pedagogical staff who treat children with special needs in residential care or in hospital schools do not have a lot of qualification and power. Hospital teachers, as we call them today, according to the international standards, appeared as soon as the pediatrics. And first hospital teachers are the nurses of the end of 1918 and in the beginning of 19th century in Russia. They not only took care of children, but also educated them. When they had to treat children and be with them all the time, they also had to help them to overcome their troubles and help them develop. Our project, We Learn, We Know, occupies on these topics, and that's where I'm speaking right now. This is the International Center for Special Pedagogy. At this stage, we changed the perception of hospital teachers, and we consider it them general educators now. We want to create a full value educational environment in residential care. We carry out a lot of rehabilitation processes to help children to overcome their difficulties, not only in their own life, but also in the life of their families and their siblings. When we are talking about definitions, these definitions of children in residential care, children undergoing long-term treatment, children with special needs, we can see that they are very different from international standards. And we use other definitions here in Russia. We put in efforts with my colleagues, with Lazarenko, to publish methodology and recommendations to help children undergoing long-term treatment in hospitals and at home. For those who know what legal regulation is, they know how hard it is to make two spheres cooperate, and there we make cooperate different spheres: public health, legal sphere, politics, and other. So we tried to widen this definition of children undergoing long-term hospital care, because it was defined as the period of time which children spent in hospitals. When we were talking with the big groups of children, and now we are active in 45 entities of Russia, and we're spreading further, it is very important to talk about the period of time when the children are excluded from their schools due to their severe illnesses. And this is very important to provide support by correctional pedagogy, and no educator and every educator must have special qualifications in special educational with special pedagogy. So we can see that our staff is very differently qualified. Today, what we can say about special pedagogy, they provide support for hospital schools in Russia hospital schools are not created in a standard environment, but in residential care. Children spend a lot of time there. The main centers of hospital schools are Morozov Hospital, Rogacheva Hospital, the system of children hospices, for example, the house with and our practice lets us tell about the change in the system, which was present in the Soviet Union when teachers working in hospitals had very limited powers, and they just taught the educational program to children undergoing long-term care. But now we treat these questions more widely. And from different sides. Today, we develop the programs of different in different entities of Russia, the qualifications needed for work in hospital schools, and also we build relationships and cooperation with our international colleagues. And I'm very glad to see that we still cooperate despite different systems, and only in Russia we can see such work in hospital schools in Russia, which involves children from a lot of different residential cares in different entities, different regions of Russia, and make children give them possibilities to undergo treatment not only in hospitals but at home. So we need to develop the definitions. What is a child in the system of special education? What are the Ministry of Enlightenment helps us open new laboratories at the base of the Institution of Correctional Pedagogy to treat different issues connected to our topic and which correlates to special pedagogy. Another question is the question of human resources, one of the key questions. I need only to to enumerate some numbers. So the main center in Moscow, I need to say that there are no problems with pedagogical resources in Moscow, and their salaries are high enough, but we received 1,900 resumes at 10 vacancies. We had to decline most of them, though. The centers which treat human resources chose only 2 people suitable for these vacations. The level of knowledge is very poor, even from the people who come from universities specialized in treating children with special needs and creating programs of rehabilitation. We need to create platforms which help students, bachelors and masters acquire practical knowledge and practical skills to be ready to work with our children right away. There is a lot to be done, and we made big progress. We created a system of hospital schools all over Russia, and centers for children undergoing long-term care, and we help them reintegrate after leaving the hospital and return to school. Thank you for your attention. Sorry for my chaotic speech, but I hope we will discuss such topics in further conferences, and I want to invite specialists to work at our platforms. It's pretty wide, and we work with a lot of universities and institutions, as well as the Academy of Russian Academy of Education. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Sergey. It was impossible to tell everything about the work you are carrying out. I can only say that watching this from a side, not only in Russia, but all over the world, the system of creating organization and complex support at administration and realization of individual plan level and the control of quality of such programs is evolving. The work you do, you don't only say you love children and you want to help them, but you work with them professionally. Tutors, you hire tutors and special needs experts who can treat children with special needs and do a lot. Thank you very much for your comment. The goal of my speech was not to tell about everything, but I listened to your papers and I made a conclusion that we have to create a complex for children with different chronic somatic diseases, because you know that research carried out internationally and in Russia showed that this generation is weaker than the previous one and has more diseases. We have 300 more oncological and homological diseases never seen before. Children will be diagnosed in such hospitals and treated there by specially qualified educators. This is a necessity. Thank you. I want to say thank you to the Institute. We are involved in your work because today the Institution of Correctional Pedagogy is a leader in this field and in other fields connected to them as well. Thank you, Sergey, for your words of support. We will work further because we do take care of children undergoing treatment at home, and the problem for them is to organize their educational program at home. Nobody knows the number of people undergoing treatment at home, and only now we try to study and monitor it by federal means. The data we have and the data federal services have is very different, but we know that there are a lot of such children. So I give the floor to Svetlana Shuraeva, candidate of Legal Sciences, Associate Professor, Head of the Department of Theory and History of State and Law, Moscow Pedagogical State University. You're welcome.
I welcome all of you to the first international conference on the education of children with special needs in the modern world. I'm very grateful to the organizers for the invitation for me to come and speak. It's a great honor for me. And the topic is quite new to me. And after listening to all the other reports today, I know that the legal support that is required to all of the innovations that are currently being drafted up in this course, in this direction, this domain, there is quite a lot of it that's required, because now we're seeing quite a wide range of legal relationships that don't only touch upon real people, but also the legal entities that will be required in this process. And there are many levels to all of this. So creating the proper legal documents is quite an important decision that we have to take. This is a very wide field for regulation in all spheres of education of children with special educational needs and certain disabilities. So the topic of my paper you can see on the slide. I'd like to say that at the current stage of development of this direction in Russia, we're only in the stage of drafting up the proper legal support for students with special educational needs. And so it is quite pertinent, this topic. It is very important when it comes to working with pedagogical and legal experience, when it comes to governmental systems, be it in Russia or in other leading countries of the world throughout the whole pedagogical society. Since I don't have quite much time uh, right now, I don't have much left, I would like to immediately go to the key questions that touch upon, for example, the forming of national regulation of European countries and Russian regulation. Because in Russia, as much as we know, the constitution of the Russian Federation was published in 1993. And so many of the propositions, be it, for example, the Convention on the Rights of the Disabled, wasn't integrated into our constitution. And the further amendments that were worked into the constitution are somewhat regulated at the highest level of our constitution, for example, the Article 43. And of course, when it comes to the hierarchy of legal acts, constitution of Russian Federation, so the elements of the convention were implemented, be it, for example, thanks to the federal laws that were published in our Russian environment. And these are quite pertinent moments that speak about the fact that Russia has signed in 2012 the convention that was published in 2006, and this forces us to do many things. That means that we have a chance and opportunity to work in this direction, because all of this is a bit late to the party. And that's why we're currently in the stage of development. Here you can see on the slide the legal acts of the international level that some of which are implemented in our Russian regulation and some elements and principles, and some are still to be that. For example, the Universal Declaration on the Rights and Freedoms of a Person, the Declaration of the United Nations on the rights of mentally disabled persons. I would like to point out the years when these conventions and declarations were signed, in order for you to understand when they were published internationally and when do we start as Russian Federation to actually work with these topics, with these subjects, while basing our decisions on the international acts, which allows us to use the ideas and principles of these documents in creating our own educational system. This mechanism does not only allow us to use these documents, but also gives us a basis for the financial support of all of these developments. Because as you understand, no funding and no work will be done. And I'm going to keep speaking about, for example, Declaration of the United Nations on the Rights of the Disabled, the Convention on the Rights of a Child, 1975 and 1989, respectively. Next slide, would you please? One of the key documents is actually the Salamanca Declaration on the principles, policies, and practical activity in the domain of education of people with special needs. The European Social Charter of 2000, the Convention on the defense and fostering of diversity, as well as the Lisbon Agreement of the EU 2007 and many, many others. There's a wide range of specific documents that touch upon education, but the most important one is actually the Declaration of Salamanca of 1994. I'd like to tell you that the University of Salamanca is one of the oldest European universities. It was founded in 1913, as well as the legal university, and it still works on the problem of working with children with special educational needs in the modern world when it comes to regulation of this topic. It is this document that sees the importance of provision of education for children, young adults, and adults with special educational needs in the framework of the standard educational system. That's why I'd like to point your attention to the fact that it's the standard. It is the Declaration of Salamanca that sought the inclusion of a term as inclusion, and as well as the key principles of implementation of regulatory initiatives into inclusive education. And even now, this document is still pertinent, and it is on the basis of this act that the national strategies of many countries of education are being founded on. I would like for the Russian Federation to work on the principles of this declaration. Next slide, would you please? Of course, the Convention on the Rights of the Disabled of the 2006 is one document, is one of the most important documents when it comes to the defense of rights of persons with disabilities. It speaks about the importance of working with persons with disabilities when it comes to education. The bigger part of the European countries have signed this, and Russia did the same in 2012, joined this convention. What does it mean to join? I've already told you. It means that Russia did it by publishing the federal law concerning this topic. And of course, the key idea of this document is to defend the people with persons with disabilities from discrimination in order for them, no matter their special health conditions or certain psychological disabilities, in order to have what we call a normal life in the society that they're in. This speaks at length about the humanization of our society. And this convention speaks about the rights of these people in the domains of citizen rights, culturological, and the other. In Article 24 speaks about the signatories, that they acknowledge the right of the persons with disabilities for education. And it is on the basis of non-discrimination and equal rights. The signatories pledge to provide inclusive education for these persons with disabilities to actually be able to get education throughout their whole life. And so we can see this in many of our national programs of education throughout their whole life. In accordance with this convention, education should aim at fostering physical and mental capabilities to its full extent, to provide persons with disability the capabilities to take an active part in the life of the society, the access of persons with disabilities to means of living in the country where they would be properly able to fulfill their needs, as well as fostering proper needs for them to take part in the educational system in order to alleviate their educational process, for them to obtain social skills. And this convention also means that we should work on forming teachers with special skills to work with persons with disabilities. And the convention was ratified in the Russian Federation on the 3rd of May of 2012. I'd like to keep it short because I need to focus on the key ideas. So I'm going forward to international experience. Would you please further down? Keep scrolling before you until you see the international experience. Since Tatiana asked me to focus on international experience here. When it comes to foreign regulation of this topic, working out a few problems with the presentation at the moment. Please stand by. There. And so, when analyzing foreign regulation of the EU countries, we can point out the following: that there are different legal documents that have the key ideas of inclusive education. For example, in Spain, inclusive education, we can see the start of this since the year 1940. As you can see, this is quite a long-term investment that they have. So the law on education sees these propositions. And then we have the Spanish Constitution in 1978 that delineates the bodies of education in Spain as competent in working with this. I would like also to speak about the bodies of executive power, because those bodies are responsible for working out the possible ways to work out the ways that these people can be included and non-discriminated. In Norway, we see the base law that has all of these propositions was adapted for people with disabilities, was the law on education from the year 1998. It has the key right for children, young school children and middle school children, for them to obtain the proper education and needs to live. Also, we can see Denmark that speaks on this topic. For example, we can see that the funding will be taken from municipal budgets, and that includes handbooks, provision of food, medical assistance, and proper transport measures. This means that different regions of Denmark will actually be responsible when it comes to financing all of these things. Children with special educational needs visit both standard educational schools and schools with a special inclusive component. That means special inclusive classes and schools as a whole. Next slide, please. When it comes to England, we can see a lot of legal acts when it comes to this topic and many documents which form the legal base. For example, we can see the document from 2001, the law on special educational needs and disabilities, which really expanded the category of children that have the right for inclusion. For example, children with early onset autism, with conduct misbehaviors, speech disorders, and the like. And this document also saw the implementation of new standards for all of these people. Then another document was drafted called Every Child Matters. This document sees the prevention and early intervention when it comes to social exclusion of children with special educational needs in order for every child to fulfill their potential for education. In 2006, we saw the definition that allows us to understand how to create a school that will include all the special needs in support of education for children with special educational needs. There was a very big deal of automation of all of this process. For example, since the year 2006, as I said, special educational needs and the requirement for assistance did not only touch on children with special educational needs, but also touched upon the what we call genius children or children of immigrants. That means that children with special needs is just one category of children which need a special approach and special conditions for their education to be fulfilling. Children of this category have special assistants or tutors, and the law dictates that these people are responsible for these children to attain the maximum from their educational programs. When it comes to the British regulation, it's also interesting that in the Act on Special Educational Needs and on Disabilities and the Act on Children and Families, there is a default notion that children with these needs get their education in standard schools on the condition that the interests of other children are not being limited and that these schools are properly equipped for these children. So we see the introduction of mass classes without any correctional facilities. But lately, after the introduction of the notion of children with special educational needs, this provision was changed. And now, in order for children with special educational needs to go to a standard school, a governing body, local governing body, should check the proper level of education in this facility so that the child can actually go to a standard school. In Ireland, we see the development of inclusion in education starts with the year 1998, law on education of persons with special educational needs of 2004, and the law on the persons with disabilities 2005 of 2005. All of these laws tell us that children with special educational needs should get their education in an inclusive environment that will aim to provide proper education for these children. Then in France, the government provides the conditions for children with special needs in the educational environment. That includes the financing and the pay for specialists, for example, those that assist these children. The educational code, when it comes to children and adolescents with special educational needs, it states that children in this category receive education in a mandatory manner. They get their education either standard or a special type of education, which will include them in its curriculum. That said, the school integration of young people with physical and mental disabilities is highly welcome in France. Next slide, please. These slides, we can see Germany. I honestly don't know how much time do I have, but I'd still like to speak about Germany for us to have just a certain level. And so, yes, thank you. We're going to skip Germany. We're going to speak about the USA. Every school child in the USA receives education in schools which are closer to home. That means in standard classes and standard schools. So these services, called interventions, as intervention, we understand a more intensive support from the side of a teacher. These interventions aren't the same on every level of education. There are different approaches and techniques when it comes to realizing intervention. There are the beginning of education and then the middle level of education. For example, at the beginning, at primary school intervention, these children get their education in mass classes for the largest part of the school day, but some are in special classes and very little number of children are actually getting their education in special classes with an alternative curricular program. At the level of middle school, these children are provided with special assistance in order to foster friendly relationships in speaking to their peers and sexual education. Students with a severe level of impairment, of disabilities, are very difficult to work with in this context. At the primary level, most of them are in mass classes for the biggest part of the school day, but some are in special classes with alternative curriculum, as I've already said. Some of them are in special care homes or hospitals with changes to their curriculum and systematic approach to education. In addition to these strategies in the middle school level, these groups of students receive special instructions which will aid their future when it comes to finding a job. Next slide, would you please? Since 2004, the legal experts of the USA have started speaking about a more precise way of helping children with disabilities or children that have difficulties with learning. That means that now they need to foster every skill in a child. They need to foster skill in every child that they need to have in adult life. And all the while, this child cannot show a proper level of attainment of this skill, the teacher will have to explain and re-explain the topic. This is when it comes to reading, writing, and counting, for example. And then there's the second step, is the official evaluation. that means that there is a certain diagnostic toolbox. These are tests which aim at providing a very general idea of the development of cognitive functions of these children, or the advantages and disadvantages that this child has of right now. It also tests the child's hearing and visual capabilities. And so these tests strive to evaluate the degree that this child will be able to work in the future, to actually exist in the society. These tests can also exclude the basic problems that can affect the educational process, such as visual or hearing impairments. Teachers can work up or draft up the special curriculum for this child, and they'll give it off to the parent in question. When it comes to evaluation procedures, it is important to note that not every child in the USA will have a right to special educational services. The evaluations may show that the child does not have any problems with their learning capabilities or any other problems that make them eligible for special educational services. And then if the child is diagnosed with learning disabilities, there is a second step. This is creating a individual learning schedule and curriculum for them, which will take into account the disabilities and special educational needs this child has. This will be done at the level of the district. Parents will be asked and demanded to receive proper permits and will have to attend parent-teacher conferences. The law states that every conference like this will require the following subjects of the educational process, be it parents, teachers, specialist teacher, and a representative of the district. This doesn't mean that 5 representatives will be at every teacher-parent conference. That means that one person can fulfill 2 roles. For example, a specialist teacher probably most of the time has proper qualities and competences when it comes to fulfilling the role of the standard teacher, and also the child themselves can be or not be a part of these conferences. All this is being carried out in order for the child to have a proper level of education according to their disabilities and their capabilities. And then, if needed, these will be properly corrected. And so, since the early 90s, all the states of the USA had laws on special education, although the exclusion of children with special educational needs was still widespread at this time. At least 10% of children goes to a standard school and has a certain type of disability. Thanks to a wide spectrum of laws, that includes the law on education of children with special needs and other documents. You can do the next slide now. The United States of America are very successful in providing free and accessible level of education for children, no matter their status. In conclusion, I would like to say that we went through a list of countries that have inclusion in education as a notion, and I'd like to speak about the results by saying that in Russia, there is a high degree of importance of developing this direction, this course, we have a number of legal acts that allow us freedom in conducting such activity. We have the practical capabilities to create proper curriculums in universities, and we can provide specialists with proper additional training. We can provide training for parents on the level of local legal acts. And these acts can have the parts which will speak about the special work of a teacher in such a context. We also have the possibilities to create a witness, special role of a witness in cases in working with such children. For example, this can be done in the Moscow State Pedagogical University. We have a law clinic and the Institute of Social and Humanitarian Education, but if we include the school in the structural unit of the university, we can use it as a structural witness. It can provide special legal services to our citizens. We can also implement financial literacy, as my colleagues have spoken about already. What we lack is, of course, a representative for the children with special educational needs, maybe not limited to children, but adolescents and people in general. This can be implemented. Thank you for your attention, and I am done with my report now. Thank you very much. Thank you, Svetlana, for your precise and a high quality report on our plenary session. And now we're going to sum up the results of this section. So I ask all the moderators to turn on their cameras and to join. I'm going to pass the word to moderators of sections. I'm going to start with myself to not disrupt the consequence.
Образовательными потребностями, формирования и развития. В рамках секции, которая была проведена в первый день работы конференции, были рассмотрены вопросы функциональной грамотности, и цифровой грамотности, и компьютерной грамотности, и тех составляющих жизненной компетенции.
We studied financial and IT literacy of children of different nosological groups. The papers presented pointed out the competences of problems of children and adults with autism, and Mrs. Nikolskaya has presented papers on problems of the formation of life competences in children with movement disorders. Also, we examined the problem of computer literacy of blind adolescents and their ability to work with content in a non-visual space. This was presented by Sokolov Vladimir, as well as the paper as Malayev Jafar, who spoke about education of blind children. Also, we studied the research of Diana Schwartzstein, on who presented interesting results of the accessibility of financial services for children with special needs and the problems of development and realization of special educational programs in this field. In Russia, the problems of financial literacy were presented by the
representative of Association of Financial Literacy, Belikova Anastasia, and the last paper of the section was made by representative of the institution of Pushkin, and it was dedicated to the forming of reading literacy and transformation of modern society, digital literacy and transformation of modern society. Other participant of our conference, Francisco Vado, presented a paper on developing life competences in deaf students in Nicaragua. In general, I want to say that the section showed the results of research in different fields and the solutions to problems evoked by this section will be soon found. And now I want to give floor to the moderator of section 1, Alexander Grishko, the Deputy Director of the Institution of Correctional Pedagogy. Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity to talk on the results of the first section dedicated to digitalization of special education. We had a very interesting dialogue. We treated a lot of questions on how digital media, digital technologies influence special education and physical and mental health of children. In particular, with special needs, we also touched upon questions of technology used now or which will be used in the future in education. So the speakers, the first speaker was Alexander Kondakov, who taught about artificial intelligence in education. We talked about what can we use, what we mustn't use. We talked about replacement of teachers by technology and the opportunities technology provides in the educational field, like feedback for students and solving routine problems. Another report was presented by Daria Alexandrovna Gaisina, who showed interesting statistics on the influence of digital technology on the mental health of school children and the opinion of their parents on these questions. And what was interesting that the statistics of Russia is very similar to British statistics. Also, we examined the research of candidates of philology from Vladivostok, Hukalenko Yulia, who taught about virtual reality in Russian schools and which activities were carried out to introduce this technology. Also, Zaslavskaya Olga, a doctor of philology from Moscow State Pedagogical University, told us about how learning changed in the COVID era. She presented some points, and the main idea of the paper was that education will not be the same. So the approach to digital education changed a lot. After this, Michael Hamlet from the Armenian Pedagogical University presented a very unique, original paper on digital technologies in educational processes and teaching mathematics. This was a very interesting research. After this, Bosova Ludmila, the doctor of pedagogy from the Institute of Mathematics and IT of Moscow State Pedagogical University, presented a paper on the formation of digital skills of students at the level of general education. And additionally, she spoke about security in digital education and working with internet resources and internet channels of different thematics and preparing children for working in digital space. After this, we listened to the organization on educational processes for children with autistic spectrum disorders. And how to organize this for teachers and students. After this, there was a paper of our colleague from Kazakhstan, Svetlana Konyeva. She told us about features of the implementation of inclusive education universities in Kazakhstan and training of human resources. Also, we talked about the influence of virtual reality and video games on children with visual and hearing impairments. This was very interesting and enlightening section for listeners and presenters, and I hope that we will use this information to develop and improve our system of education further and teach our children how to work with digital technology. I want to give floor to the moderator of third section on social integration and inclusion of children with different educational opportunities and needs to Babkinai Natalie, Doctor of Psychology, Associate Professor of Institute of Correctional Pedagogy. Hello, dear colleagues. I'm very glad that today, with our means of communication, we have this opportunity to exchange our experience on an international level as well. During our section dedicated to social integration and inclusion of children with different educational opportunities and needs, we treated questions of social inclusion, support of children and adolescents in hard different situations, evaluation and realization of their interests and inclinations, as well as their needs. We discussed models of social integration in education and creative activities. Our section was very international and interdisciplinary. Among our speakers, we have representatives from Poland, Czech Republic, colleagues from Kuban State University, Kazan State University, Moscow State Pedagogical University, Serbsky
institution of addictology. I want to note that all the papers presented during this section were welcomed with a lot of interest and involvement of the listeners. Modern world is hard to live in, even for an adult without disabilities. So I know that we are all united by the same things, and we want to make the life of our children, regardless of their state and their social group, more humane, more calm, happy, and decent. This was the main idea of our section. We paid significant attention to the means of organization of education of children with special needs. I want to underline that we created cooperation with our colleagues from Poland and Czechia and carried out joint international research. Also, we now are discussing the possibility of publishing an international scientific journal on the results of our section. I want to thank my co-moderator, Doctor of Pedagogy, Demakova Irina, and to everyone who presented their papers for their research, for constructive dialogue. Thank you, Natalia. I give floor to the moderator of the fourth section on educational resources in the socialization of people with severe intellectual disabilities, to Isayeva Tamara, candidate of pedagogical sciences, associate professor of the Institute of Childhood of the Federal State Budgetary Educational Institution of Higher Education, and to Kinash Elena, candidate of pedagogical sciences, associate professor, senior researcher of the Federal State Budgetary Scientific. Hello, Yelena will present our results. Thank you, Tamara. Yelena, I give you the floor. Please, Yelena, turn on your microphone. So let me begin. The fourth section was held according to the program fixed, and during this section, we treated one target group of children. These were children with mental disorders who underwent education of second standard. We discussed methodology of education and scientific aspects of them on different age stages from different sides. We had various very interesting research, and the section was opened by the paper of Eberl Klaus, our colleague from Germany, founder of the Center of Curative Pedagogy in Pskov, who told us about the cultural and physical basis of socialization, education of this group of children, and the way we can change our relation to them in our modern world. After this was the paper of Anna Bitova, who presented a very interesting research on
the deficit of organization of support of children of early age. The next paper was presented by Vichkanova Irina, our colleague from St. Petersburg. She told about social and cultural direction, side of organization, of support of children of preschool age. She showed us slides with designs of educational environment for children and told us how to use it for different groups of children and not only for children with special needs. Irina sent us a very interesting suggestion which we will examine in the end of this conference. After this, we listened to a very interesting research by the Institute of Correctional Pedagogy and Moscow State Pedagogical University, made by Golovchits Lyudmila and Marina Pereverzeva. It was called Modeling Individual Educational Programs for Preschoolers with Complex Sensory Impairments. Very interesting report. This modeling is necessary in modern world, and we hope it will be introduced into professional use. School education was presented by the reports of Isayeva Tamara and Andrei Tsarov. Isayeva Tamara told us about modern paradigms of education of students with severe intellectual disabilities in the context of different disciplines in different schools, correctional pedagogy, modern educational organization in Russia, for children with disabilities. And as a conclusion of this paper, she made some suggestions to the resolution of this conference. After this, we listened to the paper of our colleague from Pskov, dedicated to the organization of education of students according to special individual development programs. To preparing people with mental disabilities for an independent life and organizing their accompanied accommodation, made by Yelena Vinogradova. And the result of our section were very wide suggestions, which were partially suggested by Tsarov Andrei, who analyzed the introduction of the second standard to the educational system of Russian Federation. He presented the amendments to the federal standard, and I think we will send these suggestions to the organizational committee of the conference, and the main result of our section was a number of suggestions on carrying out modern scientific research, which we can use in organization of life of people with different physical conditions. This research touch upon the instruments used by specialists, and we hope we can also study the personality
of people with different conditions at different age. Thank you, Tamara. Yes, and we also want to create a database on this category of people because we do not have a lot of information of them. And there are few researches carried out continuously and supported by the government. Now, I want to present the results of section number 5. Елена Ворошилова candidate of pedagogy, head of the Laboratory of Education and Comprehensive Habilitation of Children with Speech Disorders in the Federal State Budgetary Scientific Institution, Institute of Correctional Pedagogy. Hello, dear colleagues. I want to present results of the section Communication of Children and Adults with Special Educational Needs, Approaches, Development Strategies, Technologies. We had a block dedicated to the development of communication of children with different developmental disabilities, and the topics of our papers were the development of alternative communication and communicative skills and a social environment of such children, different activities they are involved in. Also, Tatiana Kudrina told us about the formation of communication about treating adults with different physical conditions in institutions. Also, I wanted to note the research in a joint paper of French scientists Cédric Moreau and our colleague Khokhlova Alina, who made an analysis of communication of a deaf-blind child from a point of view of the theory of catastrophes. Also, we talked about the development of communication and speech in preschoolers with cochlear implants, which was presented by our colleague from St. Petersburg, Baude Yelizaveta, and after this, Krasilnikova Olga and Lukina Anna told us about pedagogical assessment of the formation of communication skills of primary school children with cochlear implants. Also, I wanted to point out one of the most interesting researchers presented by our colleagues, Tatiana Lisovskaya and Irina Konstantinova, who told us about the communication of preschoolers and communication as one of the needs of a child. And another research which made us think about the research in this field was presented by our colleague from Moscow State Pedagogical University, who told us about why of dynamic strategies in the direction on the development of speech. We had a very productive and interesting section, which lasted a bit longer than expected. But from our point of view, we treated all the aspects of communication of children with special educational needs. Thank you. Tatiana, your sound. Now I want to give floor to the moderator of section 6, Zakrepina Alla, Doctor of Pedagogy, corresponding member of Russian Academy of Education and head of the Laboratory of Psychological and Pedagogical Research and Technologies for Special Education of Persons with Intellectual Disabilities. The section was called Vocalization Training and Vocational Guidance, Continuity, Variability, and Viability. Thank you. I want to say that all the presenters wanted to touch upon the information on this topic. We listened to different papers on scientific potential, presentations of research, which contributed to the database and methodology of our field. Also, we saw the evolution of education of adults and children with special needs. And we also touched upon the questions of career guidance, which will be studied more thoroughly afterwards. We presented different research of Russian scientists and educators, as well as international research from scientists from Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzia, and their research on professional training and career guidance for people with different disorders. We were all united by one idea of socialization of such children with mental disabilities. And we can see that reporters of our section are people who love children, understand their needs, and they showed us the role of the professional training in socialization of such children. I think our section was successful. We listened to famous reporters with unique materials, unique research, and we can now profit from this rich pool of knowledge and introduce it into our own research. I think that our section was successful, and we had good reviews on it. Afterwards, we had calls with good words on the materials presented. So I want to thank the Institute of Correctional Pedagogy for this opportunity. And the last section, 7th section, rehabilitation by means of education of children with chronic diseases. I give floor to Lazarenko Svetlana, Doctor of Pedagogy, corresponding member of the Russian Academy of Education, head of the Laboratory of Technologies and Means of Psychological and Pedagogical Habilitation. Hello, dear colleagues. Hello, Tatiana. Thank you
thank everyone for this opportunity to talk on pedagogical assistance and support for children with special needs, and giving us hours to talk about such an important topic. We had different papers. First three were theoretic. They were made by Berebin Mikhail Alexeyevich, who touched upon psychological analysis and classification. Also, we discussed the use of international classification in the work of psychologists and the forming of psychological apparatus. After this, we listened to the paper of Marina Melkumova from Yerevan, who told us that there are certain difficulties in rehabilitation of children with mental disabilities, including adolescents who are just introduced to the adult medical system. And maybe we need to extend the age of pedagogical and educational assistance of. After this, we listened to Lolita Pak and her report on rehabilitation of children with cerebral palsy, and the introduction of pedagogical methods in rehabilitation of children in residential care. We know that the year of 2021 is the anniversary 125 years of Vygotsky, and we had an opportunity to listen to the Professor Joaquim Quinto Ares from Portugal, from the Vygotsky Institute, who told us about a new paradigm for development and mental health. And the theory of treating children with ADHD and their treatment in Portugal. After this, we treated organizational questions. These were papers of Zolina Ekaterina, candidate of pedagogy, and our representatives from Thailand, Natanum Siri Karoyan. After this, we talked about children with cystic fibrosis and had an opportunity to listen to our colleague from Belgium, Trudy Havermans, and also to a paper on children with mental disabilities and their communication channels with the society. This was the paper of Mariarti Papadimitrou, a professor from London. And the last paper on virtual reality and rehabilitation of patients in residential cares was presented by our colleague from Thailand, Varalak Sirikaroyan. After this, we had an exchange of opinions and made and decided to carry out joint research because we use the same scientific logic. Thank you, Svetlana. I want to thank all moderators for the sections. You can watch them in
video.
You'll see the information on the
now we
reports, and now we're
pass
going to
on
the
the
last
last
part. It's the
part.
conducting full-time stage of the second all-Russian competition for young researchers in the field of correctional pedagogy and special pedagogy. I would please ask the presentation on full screen. I'd like to say that within this conference, we had the second part of the all-Russian competition for young research. No matter the distance nature of our conference, the jury looked at every participant very closely during the first and second stage, and now we have the prize places in 3 nominations. First of all, due to the severity of the criteria, not all the nominees were nominated, but when it happened, it was really worth it. I'll ask Anastasia to help me to go forward with the slides. So, in the nomination of early intervention, in this nomination, the third place was given to Lazareva Natalia. Please, let's congratulate her. Second place in the nomination for early corrective innovation was Shikoldina Natalia. And first place wasn't really given to anyone. Clinical psychological pedagogical research of the special child is Johonkina Polina, third place in this nomination. Thank you. Second place in this nomination, Valeria Yeremenko. Our congratulations to Valeria. And second place in the same category was actually divided between the previous nominee and Demyanenko Olga. Nomination of education, habilitation, and rehabilitation of a special child. Last nomination. Third place goes to Marina Soldatkina. Let's congratulate her. And the first, there is no second place, but we have the first place in this nomination. The absolute winner in this nomination is Veronika Parfenova. And I know that Veronique had the ability to join us today, and I would like to ask her to say a couple of words and tell us about her feelings and how she felt with us. Please, Veronika, to you the word. Right now, I'm here, I'm connected. I'm going to speak about my senses and feelings. It's through the roof. It is a gigantic honor for me, not only for me, but for our school personnel, because I was presenting the results of our collective work of 20 people, creative pedagogues and teachers. It's more than 100 children with severe intellectual disabilities were part of this research, and we've conducted this gigantic research, and it was up to me to compile everything and present it. And even if I didn't take first place, it would have been very valuable experience for me, because none of the other conferences where I took part didn't see such a high level of feedback, no such scientific and expert group when it comes to evaluating, and to even receive this deep and thoughtful feedback was very useful for such a young researcher as me, and I'm immensely grateful for the chance and opportunity to receive this valuable experience. Thank you very much, Veronika, for the chance to join your work, to see it. Thank you for your work and your research studies. Thank you very much. In conclusion, I would like to say that all of the winners that we've seen on these slides will receive valuable prizes. They'll be contacted by the event organizers, and they'll receive the diplomas about taking part in this competition for young researchers. We are glad that more and more researchers are capable of coming to our science, are coming here. In conclusion of our conference that was conducted over the 3 days and had many researchers of different domains, I would like to ask Veniamin Kaganov, head of the Association of Financial Literacy of Russia, to speak. This conference would have been possible without your help. I hear you and I see you. I can't really turn on my camera today, I'm very sorry, but we've seen each other many times. Well, first of all, the feeling of immense gratitude to all of the speakers, the researchers, the event organizers, to everyone who watched us online, our stream, everyone who will keep watching us, keep watching our experience. As I know, during the next 2 weeks, I believe our viewership will double, and we are to create the materials with which we'll be able to work with. Our colleagues from abroad are waiting for the materials that they will be able to spread and also use for themselves. I believe that the expectations from this conference, at least for me, we've surpassed everything we could have expected from this, because I was waiting for interested and qualified professionals, but I didn't really expect all of them to connect at the same time. It's quite difficult, but we managed. We could do this. And judging by the moderators that were before us who conducted the sections, I believe that this conference was bursting with activity. What are the conclusions we can draw from all of this? Well, we are glad that we believed in this topic, and while we're developing it, while we're moving towards helping children with special needs to give them the basis of financial literacy, we think that there's a very proper topic from many different perspectives, because it is important for children, it's a given, but it's important for all children, because the technologies that are being worked on these different difficult cases are then used in a widespread context to help all people and all children in classrooms where children with special needs are located. New approaches can be developed to working with them. Modern technologies, I'm very happy to see this approach toward virtual reality. My colleagues spoke about the exposition of immersive technologies, and I'm very glad to see that your colleagues really supported this idea that virtual reality is the future, and it is a very valuable technological aspect that we need to develop and that are being developed very quickly. They are becoming more and more accessible to everyone. And even though right now it is not possible to do this in every school, but together with joint effort, it will become that, or become a reality. That's why we're going to develop this topic, this subject, especially through the path of our immersive exposition that was described earlier today. It will be our top priority, of course. Besides the resource of financial literacy, we have another resource that we've been working on with our partners, and we're actually starting to exploit it now, is our communicational platform, which has the possibilities of Zoom and YouTube together, meaning that we can connect 100 people or more to our platform. And we've already approbated this technology. And if you're interested, Tatiana Solovyova, maybe your colleagues will be able to create a new specific channel for events that are conducted in your system, that included on the international scale. This can be very beneficial for our joint history of integrating our technologies, digital technologies together. Even though digital technologies are becoming more and more cheap, they are still somewhat costly. The ideas of social responsibility of business, we're working on it. Our goal right now is to create the conditions where not only big corporations, but the finance sector as a whole will be able not only to work with financial literacy of citizens, but take a more responsible approach to the whole idea and the whole workload of this specter spectrum. For people to understand that there is such a resource, to understand what management is, and many, but not everyone, many still structures that were shown in our methodic seminar, all these structures start paying attention to this difficult category of children. And I believe that we have come to an agreement with the Ministry of Enlightenment to create a joint school for teachers that not only work with children with special needs, but work with children when it comes to financial literacy and many other interesting subjects. These projects, I believe, will be seen starting March next year, and we should take into account that mandatory education, according to new governmental standards when it comes to financial literacy, give a bit of a drama to this whole situation because it becomes necessary, mandatory, and a lot of work is to be done in this direction, this course. And so in conclusion, I'd like to say that this differential and difficult notion of financial literacy in children is very functional, because by teaching children financial literacy, we can create common approaches to other spheres on financial functional literacy. Because if you teach financial literacy in a proper way, you can use these techniques, technologies, and approaches in many other different sectors and spheres. And I believe that it is here that many interesting discoveries will be seen. So please, dear Tatiana Solovyova, to you especially, this is a great feat what you've done today. And this joint conference of ours, I believe, is a humanitarian feat of ours, and we all estimate it greatly. We thank your working collective that have been working with these past few days. I thank you from the heart of our foreign partners, especially the AFI, because this theme is starting to be developed on a systemic basis, non-fragmentary, but a systematic basis. And so our breakthrough into this subject, we believe that by working with these partners and all countries from all around the world, we will be able to really make breakthroughs in this subject. So I'd like to thank my colleague Andrei Andrianov and everyone whom we've seen or not seen, because this project is very big. Our tech support, which I believe will be able to really put forth a fantastic product, even though we sometimes have little hiccups here and there when it comes to technical sides, they weren't major. I wish everyone a happy new year. I wish you luck, professional success, health, luck, and all. Like, if you have any ideas, you can contact us. You can use them, and you also can contact Tatiana Solovyova if you need our help. Thank you very much. All the best, and goodbye. Thank you, Veniamin. Now, in continuation of our conference, are the words of gratitude. Allow me to express words of gratitude to a giant professional team which went out of their way to help the Institute of Corrective Pedagogy and the Association for Financial Literacy of Russia. This scientific community of interdisciplinary scientific research that we've demonstrated today and a few years ago, and our international partners, it's probably the most valuable thing. It is the value that we have to start with each and every time. The raising of financial literacy, the fact that we see literacy as an integral part of a person, of a child. If a child is interested in all the aspects of their environment, their life, it is very important to us. Thank you, everyone who have worked with us throughout this whole time. Thank you to the interpreters that have provided the interpretation when it comes to Russian and English. Thank you to everyone who's been with us. And thank you, the society, that the ICP has been, is, and will be an organization that will support the teacher, the parent, and will always guard the interests of special children. I wish you all the best and goodbye. Allow me to conclude this conference. And the last word I forgot, I'd like to invite you to the website of our conference to see the stand reports, which are very, very important. I would like to tell you that all the materials will be posted on our website, which will be very soon updated. Thank you very much.